was a football player. It was tough.
He made the plays in those games to win.
Their impact on the game has been enormous.
When you lose as badly as some of these teams have lost this year, it isn't just you have a bad coach.
Any player we had to double team on every play,
Yeah.
that's Hall of Fame material
That's
in my
right.
book.
Welcome to Coach. It's week 18. I'm Patricia, Michael Lombardi, and Coach Bill Belichick. It's been a great year. A lot of amazing games, players, a lot to talk about. We're going to kind of review the year a little bit, talk about, the growth of the league and where we started and where we are now. Yeah,
it's been a heck of a year. You go back to the opening game between Kansas City and Baltimore. A toenail separated the winner and loser in that game. And then we were in Brazil, and we have the international games. Last week on Christmas, we had Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday games. It was an amazing week, and it's been an amazing year. We saw a new kickoff formation that I didn't think I would ever see in football, and so there were a lot of new things, and certainly expansion of the league was a big theme this year.
Yeah, it was. And I think also when we look back into this season and we look at who could go into the Hall of Fame, that's a discussion we all have to have because there's so many great players that are waiting for their gold jacket. And I think the process of going through the Hall of Fame is something that needs to be discussed. And we also need to remember some of the great players from the past that as these years have built on, we've forgotten about how great they were, that they would have been adaptive to this game today as we throw the ball much more than we used to run the ball, Matt.
Well, we saw some great plays through this year. Let's take a look at some of those highlights.
They throw it, complete it, throw it back to Richardson. It's going to be intercepted.
He's never done this. No one's ever done this.
Lateral to Allen and reaching for the pylon. Alvin makes the catch.
Caught! Touchdown! Touchdown!
Love those highlights, the emotion of the game, the drama of football, the highs, the lows. I mean, it's why we all just love this game so much. I think the league has done a great job of really trying to they continually expand the game. Coach, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, great Thursday opening game. We go to Brazil, we come back. We've added 2 Monday night games on some weeks. I think the league's just done a great job of continually trying to just give our sport to everybody.
Yeah, and certainly the viewership of the games has expanded to multiple platforms. There was a time when I couldn't watch the Thursday night games because I couldn't figure out how to stream it. I learned how to do that this year, so that was a big step for me.
Yeah, and look, we're going to see this continually to grow. And whenever we talk about growth in the National Football League, we talk about adding money to the salary cap, which adds money to the players. I mean, when we talk growth and we play a game in Munich or we go to Brazil, everybody thinks, well, the owners are just trying to expand the game. No, it's for the players, too, because they're partners in this league, and that really helps us. And I never thought, when I first got in the league in 1984, that this league could grow to the volume that it has now, where we're going to play all over the world. Next year, I think we're going to have games in Munich and go back with the London. So it's really remarkable, the popularity of our sport, when you consider what they've been able to do. And as you said, the streaming services are remarkable. And once we can figure out how the hell to use them.
Yes.
The international games was a big part of this year. We talked about it previously during the season. But those are great Sundays. You get up, there's a game at 9 a.m., so you can tune right in. And it's just great to see the fans with the jerseys. And, we talked about, it's like the UN of fans. When you look into the crowd, we love to grow the game. The international is a big part of it. That'll continue to expand. But also, 17 games this year. At some point, we might have 18. And again, I think that extra game in the season, that's a big part of what I think the NFL is trying to get to.
What are your thoughts on 18 games? I feel like 18 games, I think we should have a player count. Like, I think if a player plays X amount of plays over 16 or 17 weeks, then that should be a ceiling for that, except the quarterback, because I think it's great to add another game, but really we're talking about adding more plays. And then it puts the onus on the front office and the coaching staff to manage the players' reps during the season. And I think that actually would develop a lot more young players if you could have more rotation and limit the player count and then have the 18 games. I think that idea would be hard to sell, you guys both being coaches, because you want to play your best players all the time. But to develop talent, I think having a play count, this right guard can only play 1,200 plays. So now you have to substitute. You pick up 5 plays a game, all of a sudden we're playing 18 games, but it's really 17 on the number.
That's a good idea, Mike. Another way to do that would just be to limit the number of games, so you can only play in 16 games.
Right.
And that way, even if a player's injured, that wouldn't count, but it gives other players an opportunity to play. So I don't want to say it evens out the injuries, but in a way it would. You can either hold a player out because of an injury or hold him out because he doesn't hit the game limit in order to spread it out a little bit. But 18 games is a long season, and then when you add the playoff games onto that and you do it for multiple years like a team like Kansas City has been doing, there's just a lot of wear.
Yeah, and on top of that, maybe the extra bye. So, possibly talking about 18 games with 2 bye weeks. So, just to really get the season to 20 weeks to help manage the players and make sure that you have a healthy team. It definitely would change some of the markers as we look at the season. We always talk about football season starts after Thanksgiving. Might not start till after Christmas.
Yeah.
We might have to switch that a little bit. The sport is great. The fans love it. They want as much of it as they can get.
Yeah.
But we do have to do a good job of making sure that the player safety still is the top of our concern so that we can have a good game, good product, and keep everybody healthy.
But we have to develop young players. We have to develop young quarterbacks. The league has its stars, and that comes from the draft. But as we're seeing with college, when Bill and I started, it was always a senior draft because juniors couldn't come out. Now it can be a junior draft, but because of NIL, it's probably going to be mostly seniors unless it's the first couple rounds. So we've got to develop some of these players, and the colleges are doing a better job of teaching the passing game than it was when I first started, when it was Wishbone and Veer. But still, we're going to need to work on that, and I think that's part of, if we go to 18 games, we have to have a player development program to ensure there's a lot of good young players that increase the talent pool.
Yeah, and I think to that point, one of the things that I think wasn't great this year was the number of non-competitive teams.
Correct.
By the middle of the season, basically we had at least a third of the league that was realistically not even in contention for the playoffs. And so this league is based on, equality. And,
any given Sunday.
Yes, and that really wasn't the case this year. The teams that didn't have good records basically only beat each other. And they had a hard time beating any of the, let's call it, upper echelon teams. And I think that's what you don't want, is that spread between the good teams and the not so good teams. And there's always a lot of transition. And, we saw a couple teams really, bounce up this year. Washington, they were the second pick in the draft, and, they've had a good year. Denver is another team that was down that's come back. The Chargers. So those teams have, bounced back into the picture. But there are a lot of other teams that are just kind of seems like they're in the basement, and if it can't be a more competitive league, then that just, I don't think is good for the game. I don't know how they could equalize it any more than the salary cap, the draft choices, and all that. But some of these organizations are just kind of holding the competitiveness down.
Yeah, the league pushes for parity, and that's what we want. We want a level playing field and competition every single week. But again, I just think the NFL has done a great job of, expanding our game, expanding the brand, the shield. It's everywhere now. It's international, and that'll continue to grow. And we saw a lot of great games this year. It was a lot of fun, a lot of exciting football, and we're all anticipating a lot more excitement coming in the playoffs.
No question about it. And I think, to me, you could just feel it. You played over in Germany last year. The excitement that the German people have for our game. We know what it's like in London. I mean, there's no telling that we're going to see in our lifetime, we're going to see franchises over there. I think there's no question that as we expand this league, it's going to be expansion for teams.
The NFL has done a great job, but another area we want to dive into when we come back, Mike, we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame.
Yep, can't wait to talk about it. Welcome back to Coach, one of my favorite subjects, the Hall of Fame. But first I want to talk about a former player of yours, a former player for the Oakland Raiders who I traded for, Randy Moss, who's experienced some difficulties off the field. We send our heartfelt prayers to him and his family, Coach.
Randy Moss is a tremendous person and human being. He was a great player to coach, fun player to coach, and an extremely competitive and good football player. But he was so unselfish. He did so many things that he never got credit for, never wanted credit for, helping kids, spending money to give kids experiences at his own expense, putting them up in hotels, taking them to games, doing so many charitable things. And he was never about the credit. He just wanted to do it for the sake of doing it because he was such a good person. Randy, our thoughts and prayers are with you.
Yeah, a guy that made everyone around him better, whether it was on the field or off the field. Wonderful, wonderful person just to have a sit and have a conversation with. So we're just thinking about him every day and hoping his recovery is going great.
So we know Randy, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame person. And as we talk about the Hall of Fame, we have expatriates that are up for the Hall of Fame that we want to talk about.
I'll start with Adam Vinatieri. Best kicker in the history of football. His ball was so straight, unlike my golf shots. His ball was so straight, and the kick he made in the snow to beat Oakland is, it's the greatest kick of all time. But a couple Super Bowl game-winning kicks, and then after a great career with the Patriots, he went on to an even greater career with the Colts and extended his career. And he had just a tremendous career. And Adam's one of these guys too that. He was a kicker, but he worked out with the rest of the team. He didn't act like a kicker. He was a football player. It was tough. He worked hard every day, and he was very, very dependable in the clutch. There's no player I would rather have out there kicking a game-winning field goal than Adam Vinatieri, probably even today. I don't know if there's a leadership category in the Hall of Fame.
No.
But I think the player's leadership and ability to make his teammates better around him is a Hall of Fame characteristic or quality that you would like for those people to have.
Don't you think great players make other players great, and that translates into winning? And you can't really see it, because we give the quarterback so much credit for making the team better. Terrell Suggs at Baltimore. I know Ray Lewis gets a ton of credit, and well deserved, because there's nobody like Ray Lewis at middle linebacker, the way he could fly to the ball. But Suggs is another example of Ozzie Newsome, who worked with us in Cleveland, just taking a good player. Remember, he couldn't run a fast 40. Everybody was digging him in the draft, said he couldn't run. But then when he got into the National Football League, nobody wanted to block him. He was physically tough. He played hard every single play. And that Baltimore defense, the signature of that defense was built on Suggs' personality. And I think that's a category that has to be put in the Hall of Fame, because not a lot of players have it. Some guys are just good players, but they don't raise the level of other players.
And that was a great thing about Suggs is, first of all, for me, any player we had to double team on every play, that's Hall of Fame material in my book. And you couldn't single Suggs. He was so explosive, so powerful, and he was just a matchup nightmare. I have a ton of respect for him. You're right, he doesn't get enough credit for what he did on that Baltimore defense.
Yeah, it gets lost. I think it gets lost. It's like, you want to talk about Luke Kuechly. I mean, that gets lost too. When you look at what he was able to do for the Panthers and the way he rose that team's talent level, I know Cam Newton certainly did a tremendous amount, and he deserves to be in the Hall of all those things, but Luke was sensational.
Absolutely. Luke Kuechly's production numbers were just off the charts. I mean, he literally made every single tackle, it seemed like. It was a very big force in pass defense. He was long, he had great range, instincts, and was a fast player as well. So he was hard to throw the ball against. He was an excellent tackle, very instinctive. This guy was a very, very productive football player. And when you play middle linebacker, a lot of guys fall into one of two categories, either good pass defenders or good run players. Really, Kuechly was both, and he was a good blitzer. Ran the defense, great leadership, captain, all that. It'd be hard to keep this guy out of the Hall of Fame. He just did so much.
Yeah, when you play that Tampa coverage that they would play so much in that system with him, he ate up all of the space inside.
He covered the middle reads, and he took the check down.
And tackle him from 1 yard, and you're like, how did he do that? Another player that's up this year that certainly I have the utmost respect for, I know you do too, Coach, Eli Manning. I mean, I think he just deserves all of the accolades and the recognition for, taking those Giants teams and the 2 Super Bowls that he won, unfortunately against us. But he made the plays in those games to win. And you can't, there's no bigger stage. Those throws, the plays that he was able to, generate, the production and lead his team to those championships, there's probably no one worse for us to play against. I think, that was, you can't leave him off the list. We played against a ton of great quarterbacks, but he's the one guy, he just really knows how to win.
He seemed like he always played his best against us and on the biggest stages. So I have a ton of respect for Eli Manning and what he did, and he was a tough competitor. As much as I wish that we would have beaten him, I wouldn't be saying this. The fact was he did more than we did on those 2 days, and I've got to give him credit, and not just for that, but he had a tremendous career. Not only the best player, but also the face of the franchise. And he was always really a model guy in terms of doing the right thing, saying the right thing, and leading his team in tough as well as good situations. But he was there when it was going against the wind too, and I have a lot of respect for Eli Manning.
Another tough guy. Tough quarterback, mentally, physically, just fits that Giants toughness.
Kind of runs in the family, right?
Yeah.
And they haven't really, they haven't replaced Eli.
Right.
And
Yep.
so that tells you a lot about how good he was.
Yes.
They haven't replaced him. When I wrote Football Done Right, one of the main things I wanted to write about was Sterling Sharp, because I felt like, having worked with him here at NFL Films, we did shows together, humble guy, only played 7 years in the league, but those were dynamic 7 years. Unfortunately, he had the neck injury that kept him from putting up more numbers that would have put him in a category. But his numbers are above a lot of guys who are already in the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't get recognized. And he only had Brett Favre for 1 year. I think the inconsistencies that bother me about Sterling was, well, he only played 7 years. Well, Terrell Davis only played 6, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Like, we don't have a standard of level, which now everything becomes a debate. And I think Sterling belongs in the Hall. I had him as one of the top 100 players of all time. I mean, he's got Don Majkowski throwing to him, and he's making productions. He scored 17 touchdowns in one season when we weren't a throwing league. And if he had Mike Holmgren, who's also in this category,
Yes.
Then if he would have had him for an extended time of his career, God only knows what would have happened.
I've always said, and I think it's unfortunate that, as you wrote, that the Hall of Fame doesn't have a criteria for being in there, whether it be players, coaches, contributors, whatever it happens to be. And if we want to select somebody that doesn't quite meet that criteria and say, okay, this is an exception because he was so great but didn't quite meet this criteria, that's fine. I'm great with that. Let's just recognize how great that person was and overcame that. But some of the people that I feel bad for in this process are people who had great careers in the NFL, but not necessarily as a player or as a coach. Maybe they fall a little bit short in separately either category, but when you combine the two together,
Yeah.
their impact on the game has been enormous. People like Maxie Bond, who's actually up on the senior, who was a great player, a great leader for the Rams and then the Redskins under George Allen. Dan Reeves, great player at Dallas, assistant coach, player coach, long career.
200 wins, Bill.
200 wins between Denver and the Giants. Great career. Marty Schottenheimer, good player, great assistant coach, lifetime coach, a lot of success in both Cleveland and Kansas City. These guys are lifers. When you look at their accomplishments over their lifespan, like Dick LeBeau, and Dick LeBeau probably would be at the top of that list, but these guys have just done so much as players and coaches. I feel like there's got to be a way to a category, whatever it is, where they should be recognized for their significant lifelong contributions.
I mean, Marty Schottenheimer's won 200 games. There's only 8 people on planet Earth that have done that, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. Dan Reeves, when you combine his playoff wins, won 200 games, took Atlanta to a Super Bowl, took Denver to Super Bowls, didn't win one, but Bud Grant's in the Hall of Fame, and he didn't win one either. And Bud Grant belongs in the Hall of Fame. So, Marv Levy. So I think that becomes a little bit of a problem, and I think the longer it goes, I'll give you a name, and we had his picture up in New England, Bucko Kilroy, all-decade player.
Yes.
He invented a grading system for the Dallas Cowboys, New England Patriots, a wonderful executive. His career spanned in a long time, and I think we lose sight of those guys, Matt, and I think to really honor our league the best we can't forget those. I mean, how we could forget Ralph Hay, I don't know, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Ralph.
Right.
How about Clark Shaughnessy? He invented the forward pass. We wouldn't be here without Clark Shaughnessy. He's in the College Hall of Fame, but he's not in the Pro Hall of Fame. And this whole idea we can only get one at a time, I think we need a correction to get these people in that belong in.
Yeah, it's hard to think that their lifespan of being involved in the NFL didn't impact our game. There's just too much time invested, too many things that they've impacted that players, other coaches, similar to Mike Holmgren, who's also up. I mean, we talk about the West Coast offense, talk about Bill Walsh, but Mike going to Green Bay and all of the coaches that came out of Green Bay that are now even still affecting the league and changing the league and where we are now. That accounts for it, and not only as a coach, but it also did it as a GM. When you look, to your point, Coach, of the, longevity of these guys in the NFL and the amount of people they've impacted and how those people have impacted the game, we wouldn't be where we were if it wasn't for them.
Well, I mean, look, Mike Shanahan, all the offenses that Kyle's running, everybody's high on a Kyle guy. Really, you're high on a Mike guy. Because without Mike, you know the league. Before Mike started the outside zone, there was no outside zone.
That's right.
I think, to me, we have to recognize people that advance the needle of this game, and guys like Shanahan, as you mentioned, Holmgren, Marty Schottenheimer, Dan Reeves, all those guys are great. If you can't get in winning 200 games, I don't know how the hell you get in.
Or
Do you realize
two
how
Super
hard-
Bowls.
Or two Super Bowls. I don't know how hard. It's hard to win games in this league.
Well, when Mike Shanahan wins 2 Super Bowls, and then there are multiple other coaches in there that don't have any, again, it just goes back to the criteria. Like, what are we looking for? And I think that needs to be some kind of a benchmark for the start of the discussion.
Yeah, and I think the commissioner really should look back on that. And I think some of the rules, yes, I think we should only have a certain amount, but I think there's been some injustice to this league that we need to correct, and hopefully we'll do that moving forward. But when we come back here on Coach, we're going to take a comprehensive look at the offseason, what entails the changes that are going to occur, whether it's coaching, whether it's general manager, how we're going to approach scouting in light of the new era in college football. There's so much to do, and there's not a lot of time to do it, even though the draft is in April. Well, the offseason's going to start for every team other than 14. And that's a painful thing because you know you didn't make the playoffs, but you have to get ready for it. You know, we've got the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine, we've got all the bowl games, then we have the Combine, and then we have off-season workouts, and then, of course, then we have free agency where every team learns about how much cap room they have to spend. But it all starts with one simple question in which you have to answer. Why did we have a bad season? Why did we win? Why did we lose? And I think that's the agenda for the offseason from a scouting perspective and from a front office. Now, before they get there, there's a lot of changes that are going on. We know the Jets are looking for a general manager, how they're going to handle their structure from before. We know their owner's heavily involved in a lot of their decisions. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Woody stays involved like he has been,
right,
or whether they hire somebody else and he becomes involved. I don't know.
Right. And so that's what really we're looking at is how do you want to set up the organization? Because when you lose as badly as some of these teams have lost this year, it isn't just you have a bad coach.
No, and I think you can't solve a problem until you identify what the problem is.
Right.
What do we have to do? And in some cases, the organizations have already made a decision about the coach, and that might be part of it, but also there's more to it than that. Players, overall structure, and just how it all fits together, what their model is in free agency. We've also seen a couple interesting moves at the end of the year. For example, Atlanta benching Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix.
That's a great point, Matt. I think that's really, you know, everybody wants to say we didn't win because of the quarterback. But as Atlanta noted, maybe it wasn't all just because of the quarterback. Maybe they have some other issues. And I think that's part of what you have to solve.
Yeah, change is the one constant in the NFL. It's going to happen every single year. Coaches, players, front office. You know, the main point for everybody now is how do we get ahead on the change for next year if you're not in the playoffs? You know, those teams, as we felt before those years where we went deep into the playoffs, we always felt behind. I think teams really can get a head start on next year, what it looks like. Evaluate your own team first, your own process. That's a big part of it, too. Take that 360, really getting on top of that as fast as you can.
One of the big changes this year, which actually is a change, is that the NFL teams now can't interview and hire coaches who were in the playoffs.
Right.
So we had situations where teams were hiring other playoff teams' coaches, and we knew they were going to be the head coach midway through the playoffs while they were still playing.
Yeah.
Now, that's been pushed back. So just another part of the, let's call it possible delay, that if you want to interview playoff coaches, that you're going to have to wait now, which is the way it was back when I took the Cleveland job.
Exactly.
I didn't interview for that job until after Super Bowl 25 when we beat Buffalo in Tampa, and then interviewed and came in there. So it was in the middle of February, really, before I ended up taking the job. Like a lot of things, it's just a different structure and a different timing than what it's been in the past, which, of course, the ripple effect is the assistant coaches.
Right.
And then the hiring process for the assistant coaches gets pushed back. It's just another difference here. And again, some teams have some big decisions to make on what direction they're actually going to go to solve some of their problems.
What it really comes down to the owner, really. I think that's one of the things that doesn't get talked enough about is the owner answering the fundamental question, who do we want to become? What kind of organization do we want to be? And then hiring the people that fit that. Then I think you can come up with the solutions like this would be the perfect guy for general manager, this would be the perfect guy for the head coach.
Yeah, what's the mission statement from the top? What does that look like? And then building your team with the people in leadership that represent what you're looking for. The other real difficult, situation for the head coaches that get hired later in, after the playoffs as it is now, is the assistant coaches. If you have a good assistant coach on your staff and you're currently the head coach of a team, you're trying to get him under contract if his contract is running out, because you don't want to have him in the situation where he can leave and go someplace else. So now the assistant coaches, it becomes harder for the new head coaches to get maybe the right guys to fit what he's trying to do. And that's a process in and of itself as you're trying to, grow an organization or build a team someplace, is just getting all the pieces that first year. It's really hard.
When I became a head coach in Cleveland, the first thing I learned was all the things I did as an assistant coach don't really carry over to being a head coach.
Yeah.
Right.
You're involved in now hiring a staff. You're involved in personnel structure and working with the scouting department in terms of team building. You're more involved in the salary cap and how that money gets spent, and not only the amount of money, but the length of time that you're committed to a player. You're also responsible for a lot of staffing that goes to support the team. And now you're involved in this medical side of things, which as an assistant coach you typically aren't. And so you become a head coach, and all of a sudden you have a plate full of things that you have to deal with. And you don't even touch here's the defense we're going to play, here's the offense we're going to run, here's how we're going to run this play, and your responsibilities are so much different than that. And there's really no training for it, because when you're not the head coach, you just don't get to do those things. And we've both experienced that, and it's a big challenge for any head coach that has not been in that seat before. And you always have to be there at one time to start to learn it, but it's a big jump when you make that first step.
Yeah, and you feel so in a rush to get all the other pieces right. Sometimes it's the football that falls behind, and that's the most important thing, is you got to make sure the football's right, and balancing that and trying to figure all that out. You're truly drinking from the fire hose as you're going through February and March, and everything else is building, the combine, the draft, and all of it's coming at you really fast. So that first head coaching experience, you are learning on the fly. There's no book for that whatsoever.
And when things are involved like facilities, if you're building a new practice facility or a new weight room or a new changing your meeting rooms around or whatever else it is, again, as a head coach, you end up getting involved in those things as well. And the pile can get high in a hurry. Well, you're thinking, well, I'm just going to, coach the team, and I'm going to run the defense or run the offense. We're going to hire another coach to run the other side of the ball. But it's hard to find time to get to that if the other pile is just stacked too high.
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing for a general manager. You come in there and you have all these scouts that have been scouting one way, and you have a grading system that you want to introduce to build the team and the vision of the head coach and yourself. And meanwhile, these scouts have been grading for another coach and another organization. So now you've got to try to change all that, and you may lose some players. I always feel like the first draft, whenever you come into an organization, is probably going to be your worst draft, because you're behind. You're dealing with a lot of information that you don't know about, and that becomes a real challenge. And then you really don't understand what are the true problems of your team. You don't have a sense of your locker room. Oh, you're taking information from a lot of different people, and it may not be the right information.
Yeah. Everybody's got a different perspective on that. Just in general, that whole process it's a lot. It's a lot. And so for the teams that are going through that, whether it be coach, general manager, it could be both, or not, and say, okay, well, we're going to keep the people we have, but we have to do these things differently in order to get better. That's a big decision as well, is how is that going to move forward. Inevitably, those situations are probably really one-year deals.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get fixed that year, then kind of know what's going to happen the next year. It's not like Tom Landry, at Dallas, where, he had a lot of time. It just doesn't happen that way these days.
There's too many elements coming at you at all time. I got to go on the road to get the Senior Bowl. I got to do this. And like what Matt said, I think, and you said this too, if you don't handle what's urgent and what's important, and you get caught up, and I've got to hire a running back coach, or I've got to hire an offensive line. Because
we got to do a lot of media interviews with every newspaper, radio station, talk radio station in town, and we have to hit those.
And Insta-Snap, you want to do those.
You can't miss
those.
those.
Do those too, right?
I mean, the media requests are overwhelming. Not just the local media, but now with the way the NFL is, I mean, you have a lot of national people as well that want to do feature stories and so forth. And it's really, the volume is it's a lot.
Yeah, and you're right. I think part of the biggest challenge, as you know, and I know, and Coach knows, is you're not really prepared when you get the job. You have this notebook that you've been working out of, but it's all practical. It's not reality. And so now you're thrown into this, and people are coming at you, and saying no is a good thing, because there's too much on your plate.
Yeah, one of the toughest things that you can hear as a head coach is like, hey, do you got a second? Because you know that's not going to be a second. But that person's coming to you with whatever's the most important to them at that time, and you want to make sure you give them all the attention you can. But those hours, those minutes, they all stack. And hey, it's part of what the deal is as far as taking over, or new head coach, new GM. It'll be interesting to see how the guys transition that were first-time head coaches and GMs last year into year 2 to the ones that'll be new head coaches or new GMs this year, and how all that unfolds in the offseason.
Well, it's certainly a lot easier in year 2 because, number one, you're not relocating. You're not bringing your whole family and process into a new environment, find a house, place to live, figure out where you're going and what you're doing. That's just another component of it. But I think that one of the things that's going to be really interesting for several organizations is, and it's the top of the media checklist, is what's going on at quarterback.
Right.
And some of these quarterbacks, they're as much on the hot seat as the coaches.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what's going to happen there? And some of them will end up at other places. We already saw that really with Daniel Jones, and
Yeah.
he's changed teams, but might change again. I don't know, but those are the kind of things that are coach, general manager, starting quarterback.
Right.
Those are all really big decisions for the organization, and probably nothing more in the spotlight than the quarterback.
Right, and most teams think if we fix the quarterback, we'll fix the team, when the approach should be how we best fix the team.
Yeah.
Because even if you fix the quarterback, you might not have a good team. And I think that's really where it comes back down to what we started this whole conversation with, is identifying what is really the problem, why you're winning. You didn't get that job because everybody was bad.
Yeah.
There's a specific reason why you're in this new job. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up here on Coach with some final thoughts. Well, it's been a great season here on Coach. We've had a lot of great memories. I know being in your office here, Coach, experiencing all the things that we've talked about, building the team of Coach with all the support staff that we've had here. It's been a wonderful year. Breaking down the tape, it really feels like we're back in the league all together again.
Yeah, it really does. The breaking down the college film, Mike, you took us through a lot of examples of that. Matt, we broke down some film, we cut it up. That took me back years
Yeah.
and years and years with the projector.
Get the splicer out again.
We
Yeah.
got the splicer, the glue, the whole works. And
Newt Rockne autograph randomly in a book is a highlight by far for me. That came out of nowhere.
we saw some zone blitzes. We kind of got a good walk around the whole room here and covered a lot of ground. It was really a lot of fun with the different topics that we hit.
Yeah, so much fun just to kind of be together and know every week we're going to come in and be able to talk football. Our Navy shout-outs, we actually predicted that one pretty good.
Yeah.
So that one turned out the right way. But all of the library stuff and the storytelling, and honestly, even the stuff off camera, reminisce and talk about players and games. That's so much fun for us. Just can't express the gratitude that I have, Coach, for you for getting us together and
absolutely.
allowing us to do this, and watching run tape and just breaking down film and talking football and all the different kind of looks that we've had this year. Man, just love this game and love being able to do that with you. It's been amazing.
And doing it here, Coach, as you know, this is a special place,
Yeah.
NFL Films, and we should honor the Sable family, because when you walk around this building, the NFL would not be what it is without the Steve Sable family and his dad and what they started over there at Franklin Field with a little 8mm projector and what it has turned into. This is a magical place. Yeah. And when you walk and see the pictures of the history of this game and the way they've honored the game and the way they've really taken great care of the game, it's really remarkable. And everybody that works here has such a great sense of pride for what they do.
And you can't say enough about the people that have helped us here.
Yes.
Cody, Dave, Jordan, and the crew here. The crew at NFL Films has been fantastic, and the access that they have.
They feed us. They take good care of us. It's really remarkable.
And we
feel like we're back in the league again.
Yeah, we're getting films from 1930 and 1940, and it's just a wonderful place to work. And can't thank the NFL Films crew enough for all that they did, and the people that have helped us navigate this. But it was fun. I can't thank you guys enough for all the time that you gave us, and the insight that you've shared with the viewers from your perspective. It's certainly a look behind the scenes and a look into the type of things that we would discuss as a general manager, as a head coach, in our interactions and all. And it was I know the fans enjoyed it. I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I know they appreciate everything you gave them.
They love that you're on Snapchat and all that, so I think that's all a good thing, right?
Yeah, that's been a new experience for me too. So looking forward to the playoff games and the way this season's going to come out. There's some good teams that are going to be banging up against each other,
Yeah.
and we'll see how that goes.
Thank you so much for being with us here on Coach. For Matt, Patricia, Bill Belichick, I'm Michael Lombardi. We're going to enjoy the playoffs as we know you will.